So what would you define as like a digital nomad? I didn't hear that term until you said it the other day.
So it's funny. I don't know. I didn't know this, but someone told me, hey, since if you want to bop around, so it's gonna sound crazy, but we were living in Chicago, and during COVID, things got crazy. So between Pritzker and Lori Lightfoot, they just destroyed the city. Your environment's the one thing you get to pick.
Yeah.
So pick an environment that's as positive as possible. So we decided to do when we were leaving there was we decided we're going to get rid of every single thing we own. We each were allowed to have one piece of checked luggage, one roller bag, and one purse or backpack.
Yeah.
And everything we owned had to fit in that. And we did that for about a year and a half, 2 years.
Awesome. How you doing today?
I'm doing good.
Doing good?
Yeah.
Let's go, man. So right back at it. We were ripping on your podcast Wednesday.
Yep.
It's the David Guttman show.
I know, cleverly named, right?
Right.
How did I come up with that one?
Yeah, dude. When I was creating my show, I don't know what you would call it, media consultant agency, whatever, the people that edit and produce, they were like, I was like, I want to call it the Tristan Dlabik show. And they're like, no, call it. I regret it to this day. I should have did it. You know what I mean? Like I solely believe and strongly believe in building your brand around your brand, your name. You know what I mean? So I think that's genius. But we got the AK Financial. So just like every life insurance finance guy does a lion.
Right.
That's the lie.
Yeah,
Everybody I meet, like Patrick and David, Spofford, all these guys, I'm like, we all have the same logo. It's funny.
Well, coming with the logo too, like it's funny because I did ask a good friend of mine that I consider like a marketing genius.
Yeah. She
said the same thing. She's like, yeah, it'll seem a little, cute if you do it like, the CEO something or other, right? But she's like, make it around your name. Because ultimately that's what you want to be known for is, people like Andrew Huberman. Alex Hormozy or, whatever. It's their name.
Yeah. I might just change it 4 years in. I might just have to change it today. But let's talk about, David Guttman.
Yep.
Where were you born and raised?
Born and raised in Long Island, New York.
Yeah.
My accent's been slightly neutralized. I think I've lived in like 14 major U.S. cities over the years.
And you've lived around the world though too, right?
So I think I've been to 45 countries or something like that. Yeah. So not quite 25% of the countries, but close, something like that.
What's your favorite place you've been to so far?
So my favorite place to live, believe it or not, is Miami, which is where I live now. My wife and I were digital nomads for about a year and a half, 2 years, and we ended up in Miami. Company I was working for at the time was fully virtual. So long as we were in sort of like the North American time zones, so we spent a month in Tulum and a month in Ecuador and a month in Medellin, and Miami was the one place we both liked the same. Like she liked some places better than I did, and I liked some places better than hers. But Miami was the one we agreed on. And I was honestly tired of freezing my ass off between Chicago and New York.
Oh my God!
It's like I was thinking about after we spent our first winter in Miami. I'm like, what the hell was I thinking for the first 55 years of my life?
Bro, literally. Do you believe in like the seasonal? I don't want to call it like seasonal depression, but like a seasonal regression where it's just colder and you just move a little slower.
I think that if you're in a place where there's not a lot of sunlight, I can see that a little bit. I think it's somewhat of an excuse. It's that whole victim mentality we talked about the other day. You can pick any reason, but to me, people are like, oh, you don't have the seasons. I'm like, yeah, but the only season I have is summer.
Yes,
like it's like summer is the one you're always rooting for, right? I can't wait till it's summer vacation. So it's summer here most of the year. So it doesn't bother me at all.
So what would you define as like a digital nomad? I didn't hear that term until you said it the other day.
So it's funny. I don't know. I didn't know this, but someone told me, hey, since if you want to bop around, so it's going to sound crazy, but we were living in Chicago, and during COVID, things got crazy. So between Pritzker and Lori Lightfoot, they just destroyed the city. Yeah,
literally.
Governor Pritzker was a nightmare. Lori Lightfoot was a nightmare. So they somehow found a mayor even worse than her, which is hard to believe.
Yeah.
And then with all the COVID stuff, you practically had to give a blood sample to go to a restaurant. It was crazy. So we left and we came down. We lived in Orlando briefly, just like Airbnb-ing it for a while. And, it was, we just really underestimated how much the cold, I think it's like your environment's the one thing you get to pick.
Yeah.
So pick an environment that's as positive as possible. So we decided to do when we were leaving there was we decided we're going to get rid of every single thing we own. We each were allowed to have one piece of checked luggage, one roller bag, and one purse or backpack.
Yeah.
And everything we owned had to fit in that. And we did that for about a year and a half, 2 years.
That's sick.
So I had a friend that was like a true minimalist. Everything he owns can fit in 2 backpacks. I can't get down to that. I mean, he owns like one pair of shorts, one T-shirt. Like I'm not doing that, but we really got down to just that, and then we basically traveled the world. And because as long as I was in North American time zones, I could do my job, without having to have weird hours, and so that's what we did.
I have a lot more respect for you guys doing that. With you, I would imagine having some form of like financial development where you guys were letting things go. Whereas like early entrepreneurship, it's easy for me to be a minimalist right now. There's not a lot for me to own. But what was the hardest thing for you guys to give up? What was like, I want this, but you can't take it?
I'm not, it's weird. For me, I don't really spend money on things. I mean, I have, one nice watch, but it's like, for me, I'd rather spend money on experiences, right? So like, I spent $250,000 on an around the world trip. Like to me, that makes way more sense to do that.
Yeah.
In fact, what I want to do when I have my next exit from the company I'm running now, which I think will be like a sort of a 4-year, maybe 5-year time horizon, I want to do a 20-week, 20-country trip around the world where I'll probably invite 35 or 40 people.
Yeah.
First come, first serve. Whoever, I basically say, here's my itinerary. Pick 1 week. So I'll do a week in Reykjavik, Iceland. I'll do a week in St. Petersburg, Russia, like whatever. I'll pick my 20 countries. And then 20 people, I'm going to pay for their first class airplane ticket, 5-star hotel. Yeah. And I'm going to create memories with 20 different people over 20 weeks.
Bro, that's insane.
And I've had the rough math is that's about $1 million. Like that's a good use of money.
Yeah.
I'm going to create memories with 20 people that they're going to take to their grave. I'll take to mine that matter to me. And of course, my wife and daughter get to come for whichever ones they want to come for.
Yeah.
So
that's a Mr. Beast style type of clip. I took 20 people to 20 different countries, first class, 5-star type of experience. I used to go to a lot of John Maxwell leadership development type of, I don't know. Have you heard of John Maxwell?
No.
Okay, so he's a massive leadership type of guy, but he was always big on creating experiences for others. It's like an invaluable way not only to develop relationships, but just to have human interaction.
Yeah.
So I think that's super, super sick.
Things lose their shine fast.
Yeah.
Memories, especially if they're good ones, man, they stick with you forever. You never forget them.
What was your guys' favorite restaurant in Chicago? I was there for 3 years, so I'm like curious on what you guys. I love food.
So, my wife makes fun of me. I'm bad because where we live in Brickell, there's a lot of really good restaurants within like a 5-minute walk.
Yeah.
But in Chicago, because it's so freaking cold.
Yeah.
Right. Like I was even worse. Like sometimes the restaurant we went to most was called Benny's Steakhouse. It was literally practically attached to our building.
Yeah.
Because I could get from our front door to that front door in about 15 seconds.
Yeah.
And so we probably went there more than anything. And it was a really good steakhouse. So mostly for convenience. I would say Mastro's is another great steakhouse in Chicago that I really like too. But I'm kind of a steakhouse guy.
Yeah. Did you like Maple and Ash? Those are kind of everywhere.
Yeah, Maple's and we actually we had a friend of ours that was celebrating a birthday, I think it was, and we had this like crazy blowout dinner at Maple and Ash, and it was Maple and Ash is really nice too.
Yeah. Super solid. That's crazy. So I was in Lombard for 3 years. Lombard, Oak Brook.
Okay, yeah.
So it's like the suburbs, and I remember one of the first connections I made was I went to somebody's like, go down to Chicago, do a networking event, and Chicago's predominantly it's tech. Like the networking events are just predominantly tech. So I run into these VC guys. I didn't know anything about venture capitalists, and I was like, they were talking about all this money, and I was like, I thought they were these younger guys. I was like, I thought they had hundreds of millions of dollars and billions of dollars. Come to find out, venture capitalists, they're just spending somebody else's money, and I was like, I was initially like kind of like upset. I was like, how did they get all this money? They seem like.
And they're spending other people's money.
Yeah, what are they doing? What's your relationship like? Because when I talk to people that have had successful exits, what's your relationship like with venture capitalists, or your thoughts?
Yeah, venture capitalists. The challenge is most of the time they're not operators. They've never run a business. They've never had to make payroll, and so they understand finance and capital, but they don't understand how to run a business, and so. That's kind of, I think, where the biggest friction point is sometimes. We're fortunate. The company I'm running now, the guy who's our lead investor, I mean, we actually didn't raise that much capital. The company's, is super profitable now, thankfully. But he took a company public, and he sold another one to Salesforce. So having a guy on our board who's funded the company, who's had to grow businesses and make payroll and stuff like that kind of person is really helpful.
Yeah.
But a lot of VCs, and what'll happen is, if they were the ones putting up most of the money, they're going to insist on a board seat, sometimes multiple board seats. and they're going to have some control over of some of the most important decisions. When do you sell? Who do you sell for? How much? All those kinds of things, compensation, things like that. And because they haven't been operators, sometimes they're not the best advice givers. So.
How important is it, at least from your perspective, to analyze the dollar that you're accepting?
Oh my God, who you take money from?
Yeah.
I think taking the right money, I would take the right money at half the valuation than the wrong money at double the valuation. Not even blink. It's not even a hard decision.
Yeah.
Yeah. The wrong money will be a freaking nightmare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fire.
VCs, like they're a double-edged sword. I would say this though, the one thing I underestimated earlier in my career is how useful, forget about if you have capital, having a board of directors and having quarterly board meetings is really important. And even for someone who's an entrepreneur, solopreneur, whatever, I still think it's important.
Yeah.
Because it forces you, every board meeting I've ever prepared for, I learned something about, and I'm a very data-driven guy, so I have all kinds of analytics and stuff like that. Like in preparing for those board meetings, I'll always learn something about the business that I didn't realize, and I wouldn't have realized had I not been preparing for that board meeting. Mm. So for me, the sort of the preparation and the discipline that it requires to do that, especially if you have an active board where they're really, you're sending the board materials before, they're reviewing them, they come prepared with questions about what you're doing and what your strategic direction is. And so, like for instance, one of the other companies that I started recently after I left, so I was CEO of Top Tier Trader. When I left there, I started a company that's doing education in the trading space. And so what I did was I created. So we have a board of directors where there's three of us. There's the CEO who represents the company. There's me who represents the investors because I put cash investment in, and then we'll have a third person that represents the industry. And I think that kind of structure is really helpful. So you've got different perspectives when you're reviewing kind of the strategy of the business, and I find that super helpful.
When you're building a company and you're assembling, I like to reference like movies, like the Avengers, mm-hmm. and in a sense, team building. What are your first 2 or 3 roles you like to see filled when you're building really any type of company?
Every company is different. So, for instance, if you have a tech-oriented company, your chief technology guy's got to be one of your core hires.
Yeah.
If you have a business that's maybe more sales-oriented, then having someone who's a sales maniac is going to be a key hire. So, you always want to have one operator, and you want to have one person who is an expert in whatever the core critical success component of that business is.
Yes.
So if it's sales, sales is important in every business, right? But sometimes technology is critical. If you don't have a good enough tech, the rest of it, you can't sell it if it isn't built. Yeah. So I would say that it really does depend a lot on the company.
But so with trading though, would you want and if it's a tech trading company, would it be the tech guy that preferably has experience with trading, or would it be a trading guy and then meshing him with a tech guy? Does that make sense?
So it depends, right? So in the instance of Top Tier Trader, the problem I had was it wasn't our tech. So in fact, that was my biggest pain point. Was a part of what I was saying to our parent company was, look, we've got to bring the tech in house, or we're never going to be able to create a competitive moat. Right? It's like we can't innovate the product if we don't control the product. In fact, it was worse because we weren't controlling the product. We would make innovations, and we would give those innovations to the tech provider to create. Yeah. And then all of our competitors on that platform would get the innovations we created. Yeah. So you have to think about what the critical success factors for that business are, and you have to try to create as much of a competitive moat around that functional area. And like I said, in some cases it'll be sales, in some cases it'll be operations, in some cases it'll be technology. It depends on the business.
Yeah. No, that's super good. Before we keep diving deeply into business, I always like to kind of unravel like who you are as a person. So you were born in what part of New York?
So I was born I was actually born in the same hometown as Marvel Bishop, Baldwin, New York, on Long Island. So on the South Shore. But when I was 5, I moved to Port Washington, which is where I stayed, where I lived until I went off to college.
What was growing up for you like?
So I was always a really good athlete because I had older brother that was 3.5 years older. Mm. So he wouldn't play with me unless I was good enough to play with him. Yeah. Right. So then when I played with kids my own age, I looked like a superstar. Right. But I was freakishly little. I mean, I weighed 65 pounds and I was in 7th grade, which was, I only know that because the lightest weight class that exists in middle school is 65 pounds, and I barely made the weight class without cutting any weight.
Yeah.
So I was freakishly little. Back then, before everyone got woke, you'd probably get fired for this now, but they would line you up in size order.
Yeah.
And there was only one kid who I think might have been a midget. I guess you have to say little person now.
Yeah.
And his name was Windsor Kinney. I still remember. He was like, I had him by like a quarter inch, but I was the second shortest kid. In fact, I was a senior in high school before I dated a girl who was shorter than me or weighed less than me.
Yeah. That's hilarious. I graduated at like 140, 145 pounds. I remember.
That's about what I was.
Yeah. I was like,
and that was after I grew 4 inches.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So like I remember being a smaller kid. I remember I wrestled until 8th grade year,
right?
And I think it was 110. I don't know. So I think I was fatter in middle school, and then just didn't put
9th
on a
grade.
lot.
I wrestled. So back where I grew up in New York, 9th grade was academically high school, but it was physically in the middle school.
Yeah.
And so I think I was the first 9th grader in the state of New York to wrestle varsity in high school. Again, the lightest weight class was 98 pounds, and that's the weight class I wrestled.
So what were your parents like?
So my dad was, so my mom was a stay-at-home mom for part of my childhood. She eventually got her master's in social work. So I would say some of my softer skills came from my mom. My dad was an entrepreneur. So he started so back before there was AI, there was something called a 4th generation language. So my dad had a software development company. And what he did was he would do fixed price contracts for large companies. And what he did was he wrote programs that wrote the programs. So he would design the screens, he would design the reports and the workflows, and he would click a button and it would generate the code. And it was called the 4th generation language. He wrote the first one. So his company eventually IPO'd, and I saw him get pushed out of his own company a little bit before the IPO. He still made a good amount of money from it, but not as much as he probably should have. And that's when I decided I wanted to go to business school. I wanted to know enough about every functional area of business so that no one could ever bullshit me. So whether it was HR, finance, accounting, marketing, operations, I already knew tech, that I would at least know enough so that I'd know to know if anyone was bullshitting me. So,
yeah. How important is that?
I think it's important. I think it's important enough to have at least a decent amount of knowledge. Now, the thing about it today is, college and business school isn't necessary anymore.
Yeah.
I can get, a better education on YouTube any day than I can get at Harvard. It's not even close.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to understand every functional area of business. The nice thing about it is today, it's so much better to learn by doing versus sitting in a classroom. I mean, that's the worst way to learn.
Yes.
You learn by doing, and I think doing and failing. In fact, when I graduated from business school, there's so much groupthink in business school, like you can't even imagine. Everyone either goes into, like, especially at Wharton, you either went into finance or you went into consulting. And that everyone's trying to fight for the same interviews. And I think I had 3 consulting offers, all of which I turned down. And I took 1/3 of the salary to start what they call a search fund. And what a search fund is you basically get angel investors, basically rich guys, to make a small investment, $25,000 to $50,000 each. We raised about $450,000. And then you use that money to fund a search to buy a company. And basically then you get to run the company once you buy it. So once you find the company, that's based on criteria you've all agreed to in advance. Hey, we're gonna look at industries like this that have cash flow characteristics like this and stuff like that. If you find a company like that, come back to us. We'll give you the capital to buy it, and then you run it. And so I decided to take 1/3 the salary so I could get operating experience. And so at 29, I was running a 400 or 500 person call center business by doing that search fund. And so it was a way for me to learn by doing, because I realized that that's the best way to figure out how to do stuff.
But how did you even get the thought in your head that I was gonna, look into this search fund, which is still, I'm trying to wrap my mind around, like, what?
Yeah. So when I was in business school, I had a friend. So I had a friend that was at Stanford. He was 1 year ahead of me.
Yeah.
And he was thinking about doing a search fund, and he asked me if I wanted to do it with him. He wasn't the right partner. Turns out the guy I did with was also not the right partner, but that's another story. But anyway, so he's the one that introduced me to the concept, and I was like, I never heard of that before. And and I'd never raised money before too. Like, I was like, there's no way anyone would write me a check. Like, I really didn't think anyone would, but I actually raised 2/3 of the capital. Turned out to be easier than I thought. That's the first time I realized that even really sophisticated investors are kind of like sheep. It's like, I still remember this to this day. I had this guy, I still remember Spence Kendrick. He owned a bunch of radio stations in Dallas, Texas, I think, in Texas. And he had invested, and I'd gotten him through some networking thing I did. And he'd give me the name of somebody else. And so I call this guy up. I'm not even on the phone with him for 60 seconds. He's like, oh, Spence is in the deal? Yeah, you'll have my check tomorrow. I hang up the phone. I'm like, there's no fucking way a $25,000 check is showing up tomorrow, right? I talked to the guy for less than a minute. Sure enough, check showed up the next day. I'm like, that's when I realized it's about creating momentum and having a good story. And because at the end of the day, the reason these angel investors are willing to do it, these are guys where 25, 50, 100 grand isn't going to change their life. They're actually expecting to lose the money.
Yeah.
People helped them out early in their career. No one's an island. Everyone had someone help them out. And so, at some level, people want to pay it forward, and you just have to ask. And most people are afraid to ask because they don't want to hear no.
Yeah.
I've heard no enough doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
So
let's, what was the hardest thing that you went through in your childhood that you feel like kind of shaped your life and made you who you are today?
So, I think, so I had an older brother, as I mentioned before, basically beat the crap out of me every day of my childhood. Like, he was not my brother's a very unemotional, stoic guy. I've only seen him cry twice. Yeah. And one time was he literally called me. I think he was like 35 or something. I would have been like 30, 31. Apologizing for how bad of an older brother was for beating the shit out of me every day.
Yeah.
He really was not a good brother growing up. He's a great guy now. But so I would say that really toughened me up and prepared me for wrestling. And I would say the single biggest influence in my childhood was wrestling. Changed the entire course of my life. I attribute so much of my success to having been a wrestler. And I wrestled all the way through college, even though I was very, very good in high school. I was very mediocre in college. And that was also a very useful lesson, because it's hard to go from being really good to being really average. That's a tough journey. And it wasn't for lack of effort. I mean, I put everything into it. I just didn't have the raw talent.
Yeah. Well, who was the biggest, influential coach maybe in your life?
I had good coaches. I didn't have great coaches.
Yeah.
In fact, if I'd had better high school and college coach, I still don't think I would have been a great college wrestler, but I think I could have been a 75 or 80% college wrestler. I won 50% of my matches in college.
Yeah.
I was Division I, but we were the Ivy League, so it wasn't like, we weren't wrestling Penn State and Ohio State and Iowa. You know? So I did have some teachers though that I had a seventh grade English teacher, Mr. Joseph. It's funny. So he had a straight up Hitler mustache. I mean, who wears a Hitler mustache?
Yeah.
And he's this like short, thin, bald guy with a Hitler mustache with the thickest Boston accent you've ever heard.
Yeah.
Okay. And for the first day, because my older brother was kind of a cut up, he was always getting in trouble. And even though Mr. Joseph had never had him, he's like, oh my God, another Guttman. Like, if you're anything like your brother, you're a freaking nightmare. I was the opposite. Like, I was always a good student. I was always well behaved and stuff like that. Anyway, so him and I had this weird kind of bond. And he used to, I still remember this, he would draw, again, you get so fired for this now, he would draw one cartoon every week, and he'd put it on the glass around, right by the door, making fun of one of his students, right? Yeah. And 50% of the time, it was me he was making fun of.
Yeah.
And so I remember in 8th grade is the first time there's an honors course, and he asked me if I was going to take the entrance test for algebra, for the honors algebra course, and I was like, I was severely dyslexic. Yeah. So I got good grades, but I really struggled. Like I just thought of myself as dumb, like genuinely thought I was dumb. And I thought it took everyone 10 minutes to read a page. I didn't realize it wasn't like that for everybody then.
Yeah.
And he basically convinced me to take the class for honors algebra. And I think I got the lowest score of anyone who got into the class, but I did get into the class. And then because of that, I was in all honors courses for the rest of high school and AP courses, and that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for Mr. Joseph. So he changed the whole course of my life.
Wow. What was the first book you read that really kind of opened your mind to reading?
So the first, again, because reading for me was so hard. In fact, I remember, funny the things you remember. Now, I'm 58 years old. This is in third grade. I had to write a book report in third grade. And me writing a book report would be like most people, hey, you want to have 5 root canals and a broken arm? Like, that's what it was like for me. That's how painful reading was for me.
Yeah.
And I read a book report, and the book report was on 100 pounds of popcorn. These kids find a 100-pound bag of unpopped popcorn kernels, and what happens, that's the story. I still remember this book because I was traumatized writing this book report because of how hard it was for me to read.
Yeah.
And then when I was in between 6th and 7th grade, they took a standardized test, and I scored so low, they thought I had missed a space on the form, and just like, all my answers were one thing off because I scored like a 2 or whatever. Like, what are you, like, mentally challenged? Like, that's how bad my score was. And that's when I got diagnosed with dyslexia. And then I got some help, and I went from like a 3rd grade reading level to a 9th grade reading level in 3 months.
Yeah.
And so that's when I started reading. My first book was, I played soccer pretty competitively from the time I was like, I think 5. And I played on a traveling team from the time I was 7. And I met Pele. He was my idol.
Yeah.
And so my first book was Pele's autobiography.
Wow.
And that's the first book. And then from there, I read a lot of Stephen King. I read a lot of sci-fi, fantasy stuff. I didn't get into self-help stuff till I was later. But I would say from the time I was probably 14 until probably 30, I probably averaged 1 book a week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's sire. How important do you think that is?
I think that there are 3 ways one can learn. You can learn from your own mistakes. You can learn from watching someone else's mistakes, and you can learn from reading. And you could argue listening is the same as reading, right?
Yeah.
But listening to someone else's stories, right? So it could be in a book, it could be in a podcast. And to me, I'd much rather learn from listening about someone else's mistakes than having to make them myself.
Yeah.
So I think it's very important. I do think, though, that people make the mistake of reading thinking that quantity is better than quality. I think that you're better served to read the best 50 books ever written over and over again than 50 new books every year.
Correct. Yeah.
So, and now with AI too, like, you can feed it any book and it'll give you a summary with all the main points in 3 pages and save yourself all the time.
That's what I've been doing here lately. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Because a lot of the guys that I kind of had this mindset shift maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, and I was like, I think it was, and I don't know specifically, but I remember like reading, maybe like Elon Musk or just ultra wealthy and successful individuals. They like to, maybe even condense down the reading and like try to identify what are the most important pieces I need to extract from this book, this video, podcast, et cetera. And I was like, I've been having this mindset of like almost like a completion mindset of like, if I start a book, even if it sucks, I need to finish it. You know what I mean? I need to physically read it, start it, finish it. And I was like, some of the books that I've read, I was like 80-90% of this was like.
So do you know who Naval Ravikant is?
Yes.
Yeah. So Naval actually says the opposite. He said, as soon as you see a book's not doing something for you, stop reading it.
Yeah.
And that's what I do. So if I'm 10, 15 pages in, I'll either feed it into AI and have it summarize a few points for me. What I would say is the only books I now read cover to cover are either classics like An Atlas Shrugged or 48 Laws of Power.
Yes.
Books that every time I read them, I'll get some real kernels of wisdom from because they're just so packed with wisdom and insights. Most books, especially most business books, they're very formulaic. You take a book like Good to Great or Blue Ocean Strategies. They're good books.
Yeah.
But they can be summarized in 5 pages and you'll get all the value from it.
Yes.
And it's the same. I feel the same way about workouts. When I was younger, I used to, if 8 sets of an exercise is good, 12 sets is better, and 16 sets is better than that. Now it's like, how can I get the workout I need done in the shortest amount of time?
Yeah.
So do a Tabata workout, 4 minutes long. Like, I get a better workout from that than going for a 45-minute run.
Yeah, literally.
So to me, it's anything I can do. How can I do it most efficiently?
Yeah, I love that.
So I can make more. I can make more money. I can't make more time. So it's like really, I value my time above everything.
Kind of like Doge.
Yeah, right.
I love the concept though of like, what did you get done last week, and then kind of applying that same mindset, to myself. Like if Elon Musk was my boss and I had to submit, what did I get done last week?
Right.
Would I still have a job? You know what I mean? Like, and it's, I've been trying to communicate that to my friends and our people we're bringing into the business. It's like, audit yourself. Don't need an Elon Musk. And, you don't need all all the excess in life, kind of like what we were talking about, like when
Yeah.
people use too many words, like just get to the point, you know, what's relevant, what's needed. So I really love that. As you get into your 20s, you go into college and everything like that. What was, in your entire life now, what's been the biggest adversity you've had to overcome and has just kind of shaped who you are now?
So when I was 24, I was working on a consulting project in St. Louis, Missouri for Ralston Purina. So I worked for Anderson Consulting. It's called Accenture now. And then I was only there for a year, and I went to another one that called TSC, Technology Solutions Company. The IPO'd about 9 months after I joined, and that was my first taste of equity. I didn't even know what a stock option was, and I was worth $300,000 on paper. I was like, oh, this is great. Anyway, I was on a consulting project, and I had childhood asthma. I was a premature baby, so your lungs develop last. So I always had, I get bronchitis like clockwork once a year.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'm out of town, so I feel like I'm getting bronchitis. So I go to a doctor, not my normal doctor, and he gives me antibiotics, and I don't get better. And so he's like, well, come back in. I'll take a chest x-ray. So I go in first thing in the morning, and I get what I now realize in hindsight was a panicked phone call around lunchtime. Oh, can you come in this afternoon? Now, it doesn't even occur to me that something could be wrong, right? So, I work out 6 days a week. I don't drink. I don't smoke. I've never had a drug in my life. I eat like a monk. It never even dawns on me that something could be wrong. So, I come into his office. The waiting room's packed, okay? And they usher me directly in. I don't have to wait. And I'm like, that's a little weird. Doctor comes in. He looks like he's practically in tears, and he's got his x-rays in his hands. And he puts them up on the light box. He's like, Dave, I don't know how to tell you this, but your lungs are clear. That's not the problem. You have a mass the size of a softball in the center of your chest, and it's so big that it's pinching your trachea shut. And he goes, I know you're going to think I'm crazy for telling you this from an x-ray, but I think you have late-stage cancer. He's like, I used to be a thoracic surgeon. He was an older guy. I was a thoracic surgeon for over 30 years. There's no benign condition that presents this way. I don't think you have more than 6 months. So I'm like, are you fucking crazy? Like, from an x-ray? And then he says, like he's reading my mind, you probably think I'm a quack telling you this from an x-ray. I called in a favor. I got you an appointment to get a CT scan and see the head of oncology at Barnes Hospital, which is the best hospital in St. Louis. So I'm like, anyway, so I tell my boss on the project, look, I got to get some tests run. Hopefully, they're probably wrong, whatever I got. Anyway, so the next 2 days I'm walking around like a zombie because I'm like, he's got to be wrong, but he seems so certain. So I go in, I get the CT scan, I see the head of oncology, and he's like, get your affairs in order. You have 6 months. So I'm like, anyway, so I didn't tell my parents after the x-ray, but after the oncologist tells me this, call my parents up. My mom's like, it can't be cancer because I can't handle if it's cancer, so it's not cancer. I'm like, okay, well, that's helpful. My dad's like, those Midwest hick doctors don't know jack shit. I know the head nurse at Sloan Kettering here in New York. We'll get you to see a real doctor and clear this mess up, but there's no way. It can't possibly be, right? So anyway, so I have like a week before I have the appointment at Sloan Kettering. So I'm literally, my boss at work must have told everyone about my diagnosis because people couldn't even look at me without like leaving the room and crying, right? So I'm like, because I was like the kid brother, everyone's kid brother on the project. I was 24. And anyway, so I go home, get a CT scan. My parents this time are in the room, and one of the top oncologists, Sloan Kettering, says, you have 6 months, get your affairs in order. So I don't know if you can see, I have a scar right here in my throat.
Yeah.
So they said, look, we're going to take a biopsy, figure out whether it's Hodgkin's or non-Hodgkin's. They said nicer than this, but they're like, it's not going to matter. You're going to die anyway, right? Because it's so big, there's no way it hasn't metastasized, right? And so they're like, we'll go through the motions, but it's not going to help. And I just got accepted into Wharton Business School too, so it's like I just found that out, and thought I had my whole life ahead of me. And so anyway, so when they go to do the biopsy, which is like a week later, so it's supposed to take 30 minutes. It takes 3 hours. My parents are pacing the waiting room. They're like, what the hell's going on? It was supposed to be 30 minutes. It's been 2 hours, been 3 hours. Surgeon comes out, smiling ear to ear. Doctor's fucked up. It's a completely benign cyst. It's not a tumor, and he's going to be fine. But for about a month, I thought I'd be dead in 6 months. So
at 24 years old.
At 24. So
were you eating?
What's that?
Were you eating? Like, were you like, I feel like I go through a breakup and don't eat for a month. Like,
So it's fun. So I was eating. What I decided to do, even before, obviously before they found out it wasn't cancer, I went on a macrobiotic diet. My dad had a cousin of his that had late stage liver cancer and how he had survived was he went on a macrobiotic diet. And
which would be what?
So macrobiotic diet is you have to eat foods in a very specific, they have to be foods that are grown in the geography where you're living. You have to have certain foods are yin and certain foods are yang. You have to have them in certain balances. You have to have like a macrobiotic chef that prepares your food. It's very complicated to do. And I just started it because I was only a couple weeks, right?
Yeah.
And so I decided that since they told me I didn't have any chance anyway, I'm like, I'll go on a macrobiotic diet and I'm not going to do chemo. I'm not going to do any of that. And let's just see what happens, right? It was weird. Even though they're telling me I was going to die, there was just some part of me that thought, I don't know, somehow, probably just being young and dumb, that I thought it'd somehow turn out okay, which it did. And actually, it turned out my mom was right. After all, it wasn't cancer. But most people, when they face mortality, they're 70 years old, they're 80 years old. And even if they want to make changes, there's not that much life ahead of them to make any changes.
Yeah.
People they care about have already passed. For me, I had my whole life ahead of me. The thing that was so funny to me was the most common question I would get asked after that whole thing happened was, did I sue the doctors? I'm like, I was really happy I wasn't dying. I wasn't thinking about who to sue.
Yeah.
It was, other than my daughter being born, the best thing that ever happened to me, honestly, because it changed, it turned me into a servant leader. I wasn't a bad guy before that, but I was just so focused on me and not focused on other people. And ever since then, so the part that was weird about it, Sloan Kettering, because the surgery was 3 hours long, they had to pump me full of antibiotics, because that's a long time to be in surgery. And so I had to stay in the hospital for 48 hours after the surgery. I'm on a stage 4 cancer ward. Everyone around me is dying. The guy in the bed next to me just had his lung removed. The guy in the room next to me just had his leg amputated because he had bone cancer. So the worst survivor's guilt you could possibly imagine. And my whole thing was, I swore to myself when I was in that hospital bed, if I can touch people's life in a positive way, I will. And I pretty much stuck to that.
Wow.
So that's probably the biggest influence.
That's insane. And then from there, you continue with Wharton.
Mm-hmm.
And so you get a master's.
I got an MBA specializing in entrepreneurship. The education itself was completely worthless. I mean, I'm not even exaggerating. Completely worthless. But they had something at Wharton that none of the other top business schools had. It was called the Small Business Development Center. So it's SBA funded, and basically what they do is they pay 2/3 of your tuition tax-free in exchange for you providing free consulting services to Philadelphia area businesses. Wow. So as useless as business school was, I had 30 clients over the year and a half that I was at the Small Business Development Center. And that's where I learned how to be an entrepreneur. Because, it's like I was having to put like a market entry strategy together for a consumer electronics product. I'd never done that before. Or a financial model. I still remember there was a company called Analytical Graphics. They made, so how Starlink has all those satellites?
Yeah.
This was the company that did the satellite tracking software for Nokia and companies like that. It was best in class, and they were raising venture capital money. And I built their financial model to help them raise venture capital. I'd never done that before. So I had to learn by doing, and that was like an incredible, I guess you'd call it apprenticeship, if you will. And that's where I learned how to be an entrepreneur.
Wow. So as you go through your entrepreneurial journey, you go into and I'm still trying to understand what the search fund, like somebody would give you $25,000 just to go search for an opportunity?
Yeah, so the idea is what they do is they're like, look, I'm a rich guy, I'm looking for equity opportunities, and I'm willing to pay someone to do all the legwork for me to present me opportunities I wouldn't see otherwise. That's how they look at it.
They're okay if they're just they're just okay if we didn't find anything.
Theoretically, yeah. I mean, I would say the part of the pitch on the search fund was there had been a bunch of search funds before the one I did, and they'd had a pretty good track record, on average. And so you'd say, here are the average returns of the search funds that have come before me. And so, yeah. And then, and the company, so we bought our first platform company. So basically we bought, and this was actually a great experience for me too. A couple things came out of it. So we did 13 acquisitions. I'd never bought a company before. We did 13 of them. And so we bought a platform company, and then we bought 12 companies on top of that. And so we basically centralized all the back office functions. And so we took companies that, we would maybe buy at what appeared to the owner that we were paying maybe 5 times EBITDA. But the reality was on reconstructed EBITDA, we were only paying 1 times EBITDA because we were able to reduce so much cost from it.
Yeah.
And we had better prices on telephony and stuff like that. So we basically bought all these call centers, centralized all the back office functions. But I was smart enough to know that I didn't know what the hell I was doing.
Yeah.
So the biggest company in our industry was called Pro Communications, and it was the CEO was the ex-chief operating officer of Nextel and a notorious asshole. I mean, just a jerk.
Yeah.
He had a 3-woman team that ran all of his acquisitions, and I'd met them at one of the conferences I'd gone to and started building a relationship with them. And I remember Sharon Grossman, who was a mentor of mine, even though she technically reported to me. I said, Sharon, I said, you can keep working for him and do what he says, or you can come work for me and I'll do whatever you tell me. Because I knew I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
So I was able to, and in fact, I still remember this. It was 4th of July weekend, and the way I convinced them, the final straw, because I'd kind of been courting them, was I basically put a basket, I took it like an Easter basket, and I had business cards made with their names, with fun titles, and a whole bunch of like positive motivational things like books and cool Post-it notes, and I put a whole gift basket together, and I sent it to them over 4th of July weekend, FedExed it to them, and I said, this should be your Independence Day, leaving that company and coming to SunCap, which was the name of our company at the time. And they did. I didn't think they would, but they actually left that company making like a third of the salary, but they had equity.
Yeah.
And the company's still around that we bought.
Wow.
So, yeah, that was something.
Like mind blown right now just by your whole story and everything, and thinking also all the things we haven't even talked on yet that you've accomplished. Let's transition into what have been the low points of entrepreneurship, like the reality, because I think social media, and you've probably been able to see both sides because you were building prior to social media, so you knew what it was like. Like we talked about the other day, there was no access to YouTube and how quickly we have access to the information now. And also in regard to the glorification of entrepreneurship. On social media, it makes it look like nobody loses.
Yep.
Everything's a win. Everything's an exit. Everybody's making millions of dollars, cash, liquid, positive. There's no loss. What's the reality?
I mean, nothing could be further from the truth, right? I mean, you have to have almost an unhealthy risk tolerance to be an entrepreneur. So I'll tell you my biggest failure. So I started a company called CityScan, and we were using LiDAR technology, which some of the robo-taxis use, not the Tesla ones, but the other ones. I think Waymo, I think, uses LiDAR. Yeah. It's basically all the Google mapping trucks use LiDAR. So what LiDAR does is it sprays light out, and then what it does is it can basically extract and measure things down to a few centimeters. And so what we basically used the technology for 2 purposes. One was for large municipalities to figure out where their billboards were. And because most people don't know this, but a huge percentage of billboards don't pay the fees they're supposed to register their billboards. Like a company like Chicago, they probably lose $6 to $8 million a year, And so our business model was, look, we'll drive all the roads, we'll extract where all the billboards are. We'll basically match it to your permitting database, and we'll identify all the ones that aren't permitted, and we will keep 1/3 of the additional revenue we generate. So it's found money for the city and a lot of money for us, 7 figures a year for us per city. And so we raised $5 million for that. And we basically, so the guys who recruited me to run it, because I'd never sold anything to government before. And I said, look, I know how to run a technology company, but I have no idea how to sell to government. They said, no, we got that covered. We have a lobbyist. We have, one of the board members' dads, ran a law firm that, had been, working with government, knew all these mayors and stuff like that. The guy who was our lobbyist, went swimming with Rahm Emanuel, who was the mayor of Chicago at the time. So we got that part handled. You just worry about the technology part, make it all work, and we'll deal with that. Well, turns out, not so much. So I fired the lobbyist, who was completely useless, after something like 9 months. You're not going to believe this. So I get wind of the fact that the lobbyist is so mad, he's getting a front page article published in the Chicago Tribune about how we're getting a no bid contract from the city of Chicago. We're basically doing shady shit.
Is this pre-media?
It's pre-social media, yeah.
Okay.
Pre-social media.
So the Chicago Tribune is
Chicago
Instagram.
Tribune is it's like
Instagram.
It's like that's about as bad as it gets. That's like being on, the trending on Twitter or X, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, so I get wind of this. So I tell the guy who's my chief operating officer and the 2 board members, if you get a call from a Chicago Tribune reporter, under no circumstances are you to take this phone call.
Yeah.
Okay. My chief operating officer thinks he's gonna that he's smarter than them.
Yeah.
So I still have a copy of this front page article, basically saying, so we had a 7-figure deal we were just about to close with the city of New York. The next day, they see the article on the front page of the Tribune, and they cancel the contract. And so we eventually ran out of money.
Wow.
So that was my biggest failure. And so I lost every penny of their money.
Wow.
Actually, we still had about $1 million left. And I went back to the investors and I said, look, I can give you back your $1 million, or, it's not, we have zero chance of success, but it's not great. Actually, one more story there. So we had a deal pending with the city of Philadelphia. So there was a councilwoman that was the project that was basically sponsoring this. We were doing a pilot project. It's like $300,000, so it wasn't a lot of revenue. But we're just going to do like a 10-mile strip in downtown Pennsylvania with the billboards and prove that we could extract it. And if we did that, we would win the contract. And the contract was going to be a 7-figure contract. So we do the pilot. It works out great. And the councilwoman comes back and says, fantastic. The project's the contract's yours. All you have to do is donate $50,000 to my husband's campaign, because he was also a politician. I'm like, I'm a fiduciary. I can't do that. And she's like, too bad then. And we lost the contract. And so, and then we ran out of money.
Now, I remember when you said you met your wife, you had nothing. Was it right around this time?
So what drove me into bankruptcy actually was a protracted legal battle with my ex-wife.
Okay.
So she was trying to get my daughter, who was 15 at the time, forcibly medicated and put on SSRIs, which I didn't want.
What are those?
So that's like Prozac.
Oh, okay, that is a
100%.
no-go.
And it was anyway. So that cost me like, I don't know, $500,000 or something like that.
Yeah.
For the dust settle, I eventually prevailed, but it drove me into bankruptcy.
Wow.
So so I had just I declared bankruptcy maybe 4 or 5 months after I met my wife, or girlfriend at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. And I love how you put it, and explain it in your words, because you had asked me the question in regard, like, how important is it when you, knowing individuals like us, you're going to have highs, you're going to have lows, but how important is it to meet that person that loves you and being able to truly know they love you for you and not for the byproduct of the materials and things that you bring to the table?
So I think that to really know, and I think this is true not just in romantic relationships, I think it's true in friendships, I think it's true in business relationships.
Yeah.
That the only way you can really know is you have to see how someone reacts when something goes really, really badly and when something goes really, really well.
Yeah.
Because both matter. Because when things go really, really well too, people can lose their shit, in different ways. And in a business deal, maybe they become greedy. They take all the credit when it shouldn't all be theirs.
Yeah.
Whatever it might be. And so I think that, if you have a relationship and you see how someone behaves when things go badly and how things go well, and they handle it well, I think that's a really good sign. The other thing I would say too is, I think you have to go into everything. This is going to sound impossible, but I don't think it is. It's difficult, but it's not impossible. Trying to be truly outcome independent, right? So I am totally outcome independent with my relationship with my wife. No one ever believes me. But if I came home from this podcast and my wife said she didn't want to be with me anymore, then she shouldn't be with me. The only criteria, or certainly the most important criteria in my relationship is she has to want to be with me.
Yes.
And let's say that she didn't, and for me, it's just an intellectual exercise. Not that there's no emotions, there are. I'm not a robot. But if someone else made her happier than me, and she said, you know what, even though I'd rather be with Frank, okay, and not you, but because you've been such a wonderful boyfriend and now such a wonderful husband, I'm going to stay with you anyway. Like, that wouldn't be satisfying. Like, don't do me any favors.
Yeah.
So it's like, and I would argue that part of the reason that I think that our relationship will stand the test of time is because I am outcome independent.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I'm always going to find a way to be happy and satisfied and fulfilled.
Yeah.
I am with my wife, and if she wasn't my partner, then I'd find another way.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. So, and I think a lot of people could, I think, get a lot more done in life having that mindset, because when you not necessarily cut yourself off from that outcome, but I guess in a sense, yes, you kind of free yourself. You give yourself freedom to fail. You give yourself freedom to love, hurt, and go through all of these different emotions. But I think a lot of people, they get held back from this pain that might be associated with like ego of having to live up to a certain image or.
Well, people can't. I
control?
think people, and society reinforces this, unfortunately. Which is my all-time favorite TED Talk is by Brene Brown called "The Power of Vulnerability." People mistake vulnerability as weakness, and it's not. It's actually strength. I'm a very vulnerable person. I'm extremely authentic. I mean, I'm not one version of myself with my wife and my daughter and my business, and board meetings and my friends. I'm the same with everybody because I'm me.
Yeah.
And I think that's what draws people to me. And that's why people feel comfortable and safe and whatever, and know that I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do, is because I'm always the same.
Yeah.
And that also is, sometimes asking for help, sometimes saying, I don't know what the right answer is. I think that the single biggest, one of the biggest challenges I think I've had through the years, and why I think I've mostly felt misunderstood my whole life, it's part of the reason why I love my wife so much, is I feel like she really understands me, is because most things have worked out for me. Not everything, but most things. Got into the schools I wanted to go, get into, got the girl I wanted to get, whatever it was, made the money I wanted to make, the job offer I wanted to get, that they just think everything, like it was easy. And none of it was easy. I worked my fucking ass off. And it's insulting.
You were willing to lose. You were just willing to go to zero. You know what I mean? And when you discuss bankruptcy with
by the way, that was one of the most soul-crushing experiences of my life.
Yeah.
You want to talk, because there's no way to look at that other than being a failure.
Yeah.
And that's exactly how I felt. And being able to be vulnerable and authentic with my then girlfriend, now wife, about that, and how I felt, and how I was never going to let that happen to me again.
Yeah.
And now, since I've had some exits since then and had some real financial success, I've approached it very differently. Crypto's also been helpful, not gonna lie.
Yeah.
But the way I think about it, and how I, sort of diversify my risk.
Yeah.
I came at it in a very different way. And the other thing that we talked about before we jumped on today is I appreciate the money so much more now than I did then. Like now everything just tastes so much sweeter.
Yeah. That's awesome. What's been your, and you don't have to get too in detail, whatever you're comfortable doing, what's been your biggest win in business? I know in life, second chance at life, your daughter, all of that.
So I would say, I ran this telemedicine company. The two exits I've had were both for the same CEO. So the guy who was the CEO of Hoover's that eventually sold to Dun & Bradstreet, he was the CEO of a company I ran called High Beam Research. So at the time, I would say that both of my big wins were under him. And it's funny because I probably made this guy, between the two businesses, I probably made him $80 or $90 million, and he hates me. Anyone who made me that much money would be my favorite person on the planet.
Yeah, what are we talking about?
Absolutely hates me.
You guys don't talk.
Well, you've ever read 48 Laws of Power?
Yes.
The first rule, never outshine the master?
Yes.
There you go. So anyway, my own fault. It's not his fault. I should have known better than to go back into business with him, although I did make a lot of money from it, so it's okay. But anyway, I was chief operating officer of High Beam Research, and his wife became, and the company was not doing great.
Okay.
We were valued at something like, I think, $3 or $4 million. And the CEO's wife became terminally ill.
Wow. So
it was a 2-year diagnosis. She literally passed away. I think it was 2 weeks before we sold the business.
Wow.
And we sold it right at December of 2008 when the financial markets were all crashing. And when he turned it over to me, because he was basically absentee for those 2 years, he was taking care of her, which is what he should have been doing. And we sold it for over $40 million. So we went from like 3 to 40 in, those 2 years, and I was running it and making all the decisions. So that felt really good.
Yeah.
So that was my first real financial exit. And then the bigger one, though, was I went back to work for him after CityScan went under, and he was actually an investor in CityScan.
Wow.
So he actually invested in my business. It went under, but our relationship was fine. I thought he had mellowed. I was wrong. So I went back to work, and First Stop Health was a telemedicine company, and First Stop was probably 6 to 8 months from running out of money. We barely had any customers, and he asked me to come take a look at it and see if I could fix it. And I looked at it and I said, I can fix it. Within 18 months, we were in the Inc. 500 2 years in a row. And The exit's going to be in two parts, but because we sold 60% to a private equity company, so that exit's already occurred.
Yeah.
That was a big windfall for me. That's where basically that's why I'm living in that apartment now.
Yeah.
And the second part, the other 40% will probably exit in about 2.5, 3 years.
So you took 40%,
60%.
Okay, 60%.
Yeah, so 60%,
stock.
my chips are already off the table. The other 40% will get off the table in about 3 years, 2.5, 3 years. But that's going to, before the dust settles, probably 200 million.
Wow.
So, taking a company that was almost bankrupt to Inc. 500, 9-figure exit.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. That felt pretty good.
And this has been on my mind since the very beginning of the pod. Is every time I've moved somewhere since I was 18 and got into sales, I would always look up who's the richest person here. And when I get to Chicago, I look up the wealthiest person in Chicago. At the time, I think he was just exiting or leaving Chicago. It was Ken Griffin.
Okay.
Are you?
Yeah, he's
the hedge fund.
He's in Palm, West Palm now.
Yeah, I was gonna say. So he moved down here, and I was like, "Have you?" And again, if you've done work, you can't say, but like, have you done work with Ken Griffin at all?
No, I've never met him.
Okay, all right, cool. So the next piece I wanted to get into, and I'll kind of we'll start wrapping up with this, is like my vision. I don't know. I'm really sold right now on like this department of sales efficiency. It's what I keep putting on my social media. I want to help people save time, especially young guys and young girls in the entrepreneurial sales world, and quickly identify, do they want to be an entrepreneur, and kind of understand, like we talked about, like you can make $1 million being in the sales, being a good entrepreneur, and again, you have to have that unhealthy relationship, like you said, with the risk tolerance, because you basically have to be willing to like go live in your mom's basement if it all goes down. But I guess I want you to sum up for the audience, especially my audience, is if they do feel as if they're that 0.01%, having clarity that you're not going to be a online coach or a sales. I don't know. I don't put it nicely. I call them sales hamsters. You're not going to be a sales hamster or an online coach and make hundreds of millions of dollars.
Right. Agreed.
So, what's your take on that for the young people watching this?
I mean, look, I think that you have to decide what matters to you, right? And for a lot of people, making, $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 a year is enough.
Yeah.
Right. And the reality is, if you take that capital and you invest smart, in whether real estate, crypto, some combination of those things, you can accumulate real wealth. And I'll be honest, like for me, I don't need I don't need 100 million, 500 million, $1 billion. That's actually not interesting to me. Like to me, once I have, let's just say, 60 to 75 liquid, I'm out. I'm just gonna coach and mentor people for free. I don't even care.
Yeah.
Make small investments, be on a bunch of boards, coach people, and enjoy my life.
Yeah.
Like I don't have any interest in working 18 hours a day.
Yeah.
Now, I was very different when I was in my 20s, like you are. When I was in business school, I slept 3 hours a night from Sunday through Thursday for 2 years.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. I think I would literally die if I did that today.
I don't know
think
how
I could do it.
Yeah.
Right. But I did it and I was happy doing it.
Yeah.
Because I was accumulating my abilities, my skills that have then served me well in the later part of my career. I think how you live in your 20s, your 30s, and 40s are very different, and 50s are different. And your priorities, I think that some of the mistakes, like when I see people like an Alex Hormozy or Ben Shapiro or Jordan Peterson, like I don't necessarily think these people are particularly happy, at least by my definition. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like to me, if you're working 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, you can't take a vacation because you don't want to, and everything's about the grind. I think that there's a season for that in your life when it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But I think for me, I'm more like a Naval kind of guy. Like I want to get to a place where I'm relaxed.
Yeah.
I'm just enjoying the fruits of my labor with the people that matter the most to me. And I'm helping out other people, service to others, helping guide and mentor other people. That's what makes sense for me. But everyone's got to choose their own path.
Yeah.
And I think that you have to decide, I think you have to do two things. You've got to figure out what you're really trying to get to. And then you also have to decide how you want that journey to look. Think about both the systems and the processes to get you there.
Yeah.
And also like, does the destination make sense? And for someone like yourself, that strikes me as like that person who does want to have 100, 200, $500 million. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way.
I don't know if it's the money. I think it's there's something inside of me that just wants to be number one.
Yeah.
I'm not good at, I haven't been good at this point at managing money. I've grossed since 18. It's like 7.8, maybe no, actually a little over $8 million gross. So but I haven't kept any of it liquid.
Right.
You know what I mean? There's been bad partnerships, taxes, and I've all of it back into this business now to the extent where I think building this new insurance business, I think I'm 100K in the hole. That's rich, poor, cash is coming in, but it's like, I just want to be number one. I think I was telling you, like, from watching Troy, I don't know what happened to me as a kid, and maybe when I hit 30, 40, 50, but I agree though, simultaneously with me wanting to be number one, I call my mom every night, and as I've gotten older, it's some nights I almost go to bed in tears because it's like, I know life isn't forever. Whether it's me, it's her, my dad, or my girl now. It's like, makes me appreciate, like, as much as I'm running and I want to be number one, I want to have those memories, even if it's the little food bank. We have nothing, memories. That's where I couldn't put a price on that.
Well, so here's what I would say about that. And again, there isn't any judgment in this, in what I'm saying. It's like, I forget the statistic, but it's something like 60 or 70% of Olympic gold medal winners like seriously contemplate suicide within 6 months of winning.
Yeah.
They're literally number one in the world.
Yeah.
Right. And they're like, that's it.
Yeah.
I saw this valedictorian speech. It made the rounds on social media. I don't know if you saw it. It was maybe 3-4 years ago, where the guy's basically lamenting the fact that he's valedictorian and it wasn't worth it. He was like, I think about all the parties I missed, all the camaraderie I missed, all the friendships that I didn't get to invest in. Yeah, I got what I wanted. And then I felt really excited and proud for like 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And then it's like, that's it.
Yeah.
And so I feel like, when the way I think about it, and again, I was only a couple years younger than you when I had that whole cancer misdiagnosis thing. It shifted my thinking from, because you can't think about it, right? I was 24. I was worth $300,000 on paper. Which
and what year was that?
So that would have been 35 years ago. So 1990.
You would know better than me, but that's probably close to $1 million.
In that 1995, roughly.
Today, economically.
Yeah, so it's like that was a lot of money back then, $300,000, right? So I'm worth $300,000 on paper. I graduated Division I wrestler from Brown University, and I just got accepted into Wharton by everyone's measurement. Really successful guy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if I die, which I thought I was gonna, what about the world would be different? Not a fucking thing. Yeah, some friends and family would be sad for a little bit, and that just wasn't okay for me. So I was like, look, that's why I decided service to others was going to matter more, which didn't mean I wasn't going to try to be successful, because I got no interest in being broke. Okay, I want to live a nice lifestyle.
Yeah.
But I drive a scooter, not a Ferrari.
Yeah.
Because I live in Brickell and it's a pain in the ass to have a Ferrari. Not because I couldn't have a Ferrari.
Yeah.
I'd rather spend that money on an around the world trip for 20 close friends.
Yeah. But you got a nice place.
Yeah. No, I do. But that's the funny thing, I'll tell you though, that's a relatively new. So I just moved in August, and I was joking because I said, I never liked working from home. I realized it's because I had the wrong home.
I was going to say I'd work from home every day there. But man, this has been one of my favorite podcasts. Is there anything else on your heart and mind you want to get out?
I guess really it's just sort of a little bit of a cautionary tale to, try to learn from some of the mistakes I made. I think that something like 95% of all problems can be avoided by being honest with yourself and being honest with those you care about, to those you care about. Don't leave questions unasked, and don't leave things unspoken.
Yeah.
Whether it's family relationships, friendships, romantic relationships, business relationships, that's what causes the problem. And most relationships don't work out because, honestly, people aren't honest with themselves, because if they're honest with themselves and it's not what they want it to be, then they got to do something about it. So most people travel through life with their head in the sand, even really successful people. And I guess I would just do an inventory of your life and really try to be as clear-eyed about it as possible. Try to make sure you don't leave questions unasked and things unsaid.
That's awesome. Well, guys, this is David Guttman. Where can people find you if they want to contact you?
I've got all the. So I basically do a weekly podcast.
Yeah.
I also do a weekly Coffee with Podge episode. It's basically I pretend like I'm talking to my daughter for 5 to 10 minutes. I really enjoy doing those. She's happy I resurrected that. So you can find me on any of the social media channels. All my handles are a little bit different, but type Dave Guttman on YouTube and you'll find me, or David Guttman on David Guttman Podcast. You'll find all my channels. I also, if anyone's interested in trading, it's elite-trader.com. And you can find all so if anyone wants to be a Forex, futures, any kind of trader, it's some of the best education out there. So Sean Banks and Josh Barnes, who run all the trading stuff there, two of the best traders out there. So shout out to those guys. But honestly, I'm not trying to monetize anything I'm doing. I'm really just trying to be helpful and useful to the world.
Yeah.
And so if people want to follow me and find my content useful, share it.
That's a good place to be in. I got to monetize every step I take. Just fund this business. Let's go. Thank you so much, Dave. Have a blessed day. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Yes, sir.